everyone, and welcome to Picture This, the show where we go through every single Best Picture nominee ever, including the winners, obviously, because they were nominees once first. We go through every year, not in order. We jump around. As you see right now on the bottom of the screen, we are doing 1944, a classic year. I am here joined by my excellent, dapper co-host, Mr. Chad Webb. How are you doing, Chad?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to finally start speaking about classics. This isn't something that I generally do, is watch a lot of classics, and so a lot of this is new for me. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, the earliest show we've done so far is 1994, and this is 50 years before that. So it's
Right.
kind of crazy. How the show works, basically, we go through a little bit of the history of 1944 itself to set the stage. We go through some movies that didn't make the cut, because we're only talking about the Best Picture nominees today. We go through those nominees that didn't make the cut that we think are notable, maybe some not so notable, who knows. Then we go through the Oscar ceremony itself. What was notable about this specific ceremony? This ceremony in particular has a lot of importance it holds. It has some records that will never be broken. So it's going to be definitely a lot of fun. And then we'll go through each movie, break it down movie by movie, all 5 movies. And then at the very end, we each pick our best actor and best actress from those 5 movies. They could be nominated. They might not be nominated. They might be bit parts. Am I forgetting anything else, Chad?
I don't think so.
Yeah, and then we'll tease, of course, next month's movies
selection. Right.
It is a much bigger selection, but we'll get there in a sec. So 1944, Chad. Tell us about the history of 1944. Tell us about what was the world like in 1944, because we have no clue. We have never experienced
it. We did not exist in any form, I'm sure, at this time. Who knows? But yeah, basically, I mean, when I went to look up facts about, 1944, all I could really see is just a bunch of facts about World War II, right. Because this was basically towards the end, but kind of also in the heart of World War II. And, some of these movies actually, focus on that a little bit, the war itself. And so I feel like, the war is really great to talk about, but I just couldn't, without compiling 100 facts to sit here and explain. I was like, well, maybe we could just generally talk about what we know about World War II, which for me is not much.
Right, and it's interesting because the movie sphere, everything going on with movie making in general is so different because of the war too. Because some people don't want to always be reminded of what's going on politically and universally outside of their homes, so or theaters at this time. So it was really a sense of escapism, and we'll see a lot of these movies. It'll be interesting to discuss them in the context of this time period and to see exactly what the purpose of these movies were for, because some of them are totally escapist, some of them tackle the themes of war head on. Some of them are one of them is very much catered toward American history. So it's really interesting. And then you have 2 movies that are total genre films. It's a big collection of a bunch of different films, and we haven't said what the films are, so we might as well say that now. We're 4 minutes in. Forgot to say it. It happens. We are covering Double Indemnity, Gaslight, Going My Way, Since You Went Away, and Wilson. And the winner was Going My Way. But we will be talking about all of them alphabetically, as we always do. But yeah, the wartime. I mean, it's the tail end of the war, I imagine, right?
I think it ended in 45. Yes.
Yeah.
Started in 39, ended in 45.
Right. There you go. Brilliant, Chad. Thank you for remembering that, because
I looked it up.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, they don't have to know that. You're a scholar. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just funny because it's something that I think the closest thing we'll ever experience to that in terms of a movie, the movie business is what we just experienced with the pandemic. If you're listening to this years from now, we're hopefully way past it. But, in terms of just the whole global, everyone's kind of experiencing the same thing, and movie making has suffered because of it. And I think it's interesting to see that these movies did come out. A very slim amount of movies did come out that year too, but I think that was pretty normal in the 40s for only a few movies come out. Is there anything else in terms of the year itself aside from the war that happened, or is that pretty much just, I'm assuming
pretty much not much that I could pick up on? I just basically said happened towards the end of the war. It had been happening for about 4 years, and they canceled the Summer Olympics for it because of the war. But I mean, you said it.
We see that happening now.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you said it perfectly yourself. I think the pandemic is, that and maybe 9/11 are the only big things close to having, and you were only 3 then. So, it's the pandemic is the closest thing that we have to kind of understanding a little bit about how life might have been then with all the uncertainty of war and, in this case, disease. So
yeah, were there any notable deaths, births? I know you
yes,
sometimes like to look at albums, but I don't know how those work back then.
I have a little bit of all of that. So
cool.
yeah,
Right.
so
carry away.
So births, yeah, I was excited to see a lot of familiar names. You had births. You had Rutger Hauer, Jonathan Demme, Alan Parker, Diana Ross, Craig T. Nelson, John Rhys Davies, George Lucas, Danny Trejo, Peter Mayhew, Frank Oz, Gary Busey, Jeffrey Tambor, Sam Elliott, Peter Weir, Michael Douglas, Danny DeVito, and Harold Ramis.
Wow. That is a murderous row. I mean, imagine, I know some of those people have worked together, like obviously Peter Mayhew has worked with George Lucas and other things, but I'm wondering what would happen if you put all of them in a room and told them to make a movie together. Like what that product would be. That is amazing. And so many different genres, so many different some who have departed us already, some who are still working right now. Like did you say Michael Douglas?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, he's still in Marvel movies.
And Danny DeVito still on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So
right, which I assume has been running longer than the Oscars itself at this point.
Not quite, but close.
May as well be. Any significant deaths?
Yeah. Well, I just wrote down what was there on Wikipedia because I don't know any of these names, but you had Myrta Sterling, Emil Fjellstrom, Mildred Harris, Hugo Thimmig, Laird Cregar, Lupe Velez, and Glenn Miller. I mean, these names are probably all very unfamiliar to us, but I'm sure they've done something important to be noteworthy.
For sure. Yeah, we always like to shout them out.
Not trying to be dismissive. They're just not familiar to us.
Yeah, we like to shout them out because, this is an Oscar show, and sometimes in memoriams do a good service of doing that, and sometimes they don't, and we have our own little in memoriam for that. So rest in peace. Thank you for your work, even though it was decades and decades ago. And you said you had a little bit of albums, Chad?
So I basically, because I have like some sources that I use to, look up like the best albums are considered best, of any given year. And so I looked up this year. I haven't heard any of the albums that I recorded that I wrote down, but some familiar names here. So you have an album of outstanding arrangements by Glenn Miller, the King Cole Trio by the King Cole Trio, Upswing by Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, and Artie Shaw, Jazz Classics by Louis Armstrong.
Oh, nice.
Benny Goodman Sextet by Benny Goodman Sextet. Boogie Woogie in Blue by Harry the Hipster Gibson. Woody Guthrie by Woody Guthrie. Meet Me in St. Louis by Judy Garland. New York Jazz by James P. Johnson, and Favorites by Fat Waller. And if anything with these albums, it kind of just like, puts you in the mood for like what kind of time this was. There's a lot of jazz happening, Judy Garland released an album.
And we do have a musical that we will be talking about that won Best Picture. So musicals were very popular. Just that style of music, a lot of people are a big fan of it. And we will talk about Bing Crosby himself becoming a bigger star because of this year and what happened here that would eventually propel his career forward. So let's transition now into a list of movies that we think maybe missed the mark. We will talk about the Oscar ceremony in a sec, but there are a few movies that I have seen a few of them, but I also jotted down some other movies that came out in 1944. One of them, like you just said, Meet Me in St. Louis, one of my favorite movie musicals, one of my favorite Christmas movies. It is a great movie. Judy Garland, arguably her best performance next to Wizard of Oz for me. Maybe nice. Star is Born, who knows? But yeah, Meet Me in St. Louis. I've seen the stage play. My sister, it was her first role when she was 5 years old. She played Tootie in Meet Me in St. Louis. So I've been a fan of the show since I was 10 years old because I'm 5 years older than her. So I discovered it on the stage, watched the movie, beautiful movie. Surprised it didn't get nominated, honestly, especially considering another musical that's nominated against it. I'd argue it's, I don't want to spoil too much of my ranking, obviously, but I'd say Meet Me in St. Louis is probably the superior musical. You also had Lifeboat, one of Alfred Hitchcock's notable films. All takes place on the lifeboat itself, another bottle film. We call them, I guess, a bottle film when it all takes place in the same location. Yeah. I haven't seen it, but it's notable. Here's a fun one. The Three Caballeros by Disney. It is a Disney animated movie starring Donald Duck, Panchito, and Jose Carioca. They've done a few movies for Disney. They have a ride in Disney World Epcot in the Mexico Pavilion. They have the Grand Fiesta Tour ride, which I love a lot. It's a fun little movie, a fun little kids movie. Not one of Disney's best, but it's still probably one of the best of this year that I've seen. And then another one that I found very intriguing the first ever live action rendition of a Marvel character in any media. The
Mm-hmm.
first Captain America movie from 1944. It was a black and white serial film, loosely
Yep.
based on the Captain America character. Also came out in 1944. So that was technically the start of Marvel films. And that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
crazy. So
Yeah.
it's pretty notable year. Chad, did you have any other movies to mention from 1944?
Yeah, I actually wrote that Captain America one down because I was like, look at that. Look at what's big today and what started then. So that's
Right.
that's great. I wrote that one down. I didn't actually write the other ones that you mentioned down, but I want to watch all of them now.
Yeah, me too.
I wrote down the Invisible Man's Revenge because that's also kind of harkening back to today when we got a great The Invisible Man movie, and now I kind of want to watch all of the old ones. I think we have the Invisible Man like classics box set, so we need to
awesome.
get cracking on that.
Yeah, all those great ones, Frankenstein and Dracula and Invisible Man, so good.
And then another movie that I actually did see a while back, Arsenic and Old Lace. And in fact, I was in a play version of this movie.
I was going to say, I've heard of I've read the play, but I've never seen it. But that's awesome. Who did you play?
Oh, I can't even remember, to be honest. I have to look up like my
old-fashioned names,
I think I was an old man. No, I did that in another play. Honestly, I can't remember. Maybe I was a ghost.
That's great, though. I mean, it's interesting ghosts? Because, like you said, with Arsenic and Old Lace, and like I said with Mimi and St. Louis, like these things are still being put on today. Maybe these 5 nominees in particular maybe aren't as much in the mainstream, but Mimi and St. Louis still talked about every Christmas. Arsenic and Old Lace I've heard talked about a lot. Three Caballeros is obviously has a ride at Disney, so like a lot of these movies still carry on decades and decades later. So,
oh man, looking into Arsenic and Old Lace briefly, you have Boris Karloff, Cary Grant, Peter Lorre. Oh my God.
That's a cast, all right.
Yeah, that is a cast. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are our movies. Any other movies?
Directed by Frank Capra, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Again, we'll talk about him eventually. I'm sure we'll talk about him several years. As I said, we do bounce around. So those were the movies that didn't make it, but these are the 5 that did that we're going to talk about. But really, first, let's set the stage for the Oscar ceremony itself. Now, this is the first Oscar ceremony that we've talked about that was not televised. So they were not televised till I don't remember exactly what year, but this was still at the time where they were radio broadcasts. They were done through ABC Radio, through Blue Network, which was a radio station owned by ABC. And it was a 70-minute broadcast. So if you want to compare it to today, we get 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours, depending on how long people talk when they present or accept awards. 70 minutes is a lot less than we're used to seeing for Oscars, especially. They played every clip audio-wise, and for the clips that they showed, they literally had to narrate what was going on screen for people listening who hadn't seen those movies yet, I guess, to say, like, oh, man is putting arm on chair, like things like that, if it was a double indemnity clip or something like that.
I imagine there were a lot less commercials then.
Right, exactly.
Who knows?
If any. Maybe it was just like, and the award for Best Picture sponsored by this company is
Ovaltine.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like maybe they just peppered them into the awards themselves. I wish that was more of what we saw today. It was actually on March 15, 1945. I forgot to preface at the beginning that the movies that we're talking about came out in 44, even though the Oscars were in 45, but it's easier to address it by the year itself that they were made. At the Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, the famous Chinese theater is where they were held, hosted by Bob Hope, who has hosted so many Oscar ceremonies. I think he's hosted the most of anyone. And John Cromwell, who, if you recognize the name, it's because he directed one of these films. So John Cromwell hosted a ceremony where his own film was nominated, which is very interesting. The reason why it is so significant is for 2 reasons, 2 big records. First, this is the first year to officially limit the nominee count to 5. We did cover 8 whole movies last month with 2020 that we wanted to go for 1 for 5. And Chad even said, like, well, what was the first year where they permanently said you need 5 nominees? And it was this year. So before then, you saw sometimes 10 nominees, sometimes 12 nominees. And then later on in, I think, 2008, 2009, it was 2009. After the Dark Knight controversy, they decided to go back to 5 to 10. And now, next year, it is a permanent 10. So this was the first time they permanently set it to 5 nominees.
So 65 years that tradition lasted.
Yeah, nice math. I wouldn't have been able to do that on the top of my head. Yeah, you're pulling out the history and the math. Good job, Chad. You're outsmarting everyone today. All right, so limited to 5. And this is one of the coolest history Oscar facts I have right here. Barry Fitzgerald, the one and only Barry Fitzgerald from Going My Way, is the only person ever in Oscar history to be nominated for Best Actor and
Oh,
Best Supporting Actor
I saw
for the
that.
same role,
Interesting.
same film. We've seen, obviously, Marlon Brando was up for lead for Vito Corleone, and then Robert De Niro was up for supporting a few years later for Vito Corleone. That has happened. We've seen, Sylvester Stallone get nominated for lead in Rocky and then supporting in Creed. But we have never seen an actor in the same year for the same film get nominated for 2 awards in 2 different categories. And honestly, they did reinstate rules that could not happen, but I feel like that may have happened again this year because, as we saw, Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith
Yeah.
Stanfield this year for Judas and the Black Messiah. Lakeith was being campaigned for lead, and they put him in supporting. So I'm wondering if a lot of people got behind that. Maybe either one of them ended up placing in the top 5 for both, and they had to make the cut. Who knows? I don't know how it works nowadays, but I think that's notable. And he ended up winning, obviously, for supporting because his co-star won lead. But I think that's really awesome. Imagine if he won both and he had that under his name. I think
2
that'd be
trophies,
amazing.
like, yeah.
Right. And the winner for Best Supporting Actor is Barry Fitzgerald, Going My Way. And the winner for Best Actor, presented by Ovaltine, is Barry Fitzgerald. It'd be like, what is going on? That is so fun. It's something that I'm glad they fixed because then we're gonna end up seeing like Meryl Streep win Best Actress and Supporting Actress for Kramer versus Kramer. We're things like that would happen. Viola Davis would win lead and supporting for Fences, which I wouldn't be mad about. Things like that would happen if they kept it that way. So I'm glad they went their way, if you will, going their way. Get it? And got away with that. So that is the Oscar ceremony. Let's dive right into the first film that we'll be talking about, which is Double Indemnity, directed by Billy Wilder. Chad, give us a little bit of introductory material about Double Indemnity.
Yes, Double Indemnity, directed by Billy Wilder, written by Billy Wilder and Raymond Chandler, music by Miklos Rosa, cinematography by John Sayetz, starring Fred McMurray, Barbara Stanwyck, Edward G. Robinson, Porter Hall, Jean Heather, Byron Barr, Richard Gaines, and John Filber. Some fun facts I recorded. We will see Jean Heather and Porter Hall in another movie later. Double Indemnity was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the U.S. Library of Congress in 1992. It was placed on the AFI's list of 100 best American films of all time in 1998 and was still there in 2007, taking an even higher position. Wilder considered this his best film in terms of having the fewest scripting and shooting mistakes. The movie is based on a book of the same name by James M. Cain, and Cain actually complimented the movie, so we don't have another Stephen King, Stanley Kubrick debacle on our hands. And then also, I just wanted to say, did you count how many times Neff says baby?
I have not. Do you have the number?
It's probably about 300. No, I don't know.
Yeah,
I need to watch it again and just tally.
That is your classic noir, like let's try to make him cool, baby. Like
Baby.
let's make him say baby every time he says a line because it just makes you infinitely cooler. And honestly, it kind of does. It works.
Yeah, he is really cool in this movie.
Yeah. What did you think of the movie itself?
Well, I do have a brief little plot synopsis.
That's
Basically,
right, of course.
It's about an insurance salesman and a frustrated wife conspire to commit murder in order to take advantage of an insurance clause called double indemnity and collect a heavy payout.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, watching this movie, like I just like from the very like start of it, just watching him slowly like walk into his place of work, and just like barely talking, and you're just like, what's going on with this dude? And just from like that very beginning, I knew I was about to watch something amazing.
Yeah.
And I really loved that it's there's like, who is the protagonist in this movie? I mean, it's kind of an anti-hero story a little bit here because the main character is not necessarily a good guy. I mean, he helps someone kill a dude who is a father and a husband. Yeah, he does. Yeah, that's right, because he strangles him.
Yeah. I think it's interesting in this film because it's one of those instances where, this guy that you think is good is revealed to be bad, but instead of saving the reveal for later and like saving the like making it be something that happens 20 minutes in where she comes up with this plan and he goes along with it, from the get-go that he did it.
Hold tight to that cheap cigar of yours, Keys. I killed Dietrichson.
And I think that's a really interesting framing device, having him sit in the chair and basically say, I killed the guy, and then watching all the events transpire. So you're never guessing, like, oh, is he actually going to go through with it? He went through with it, and it's watching him kind of almost retrace his steps and try to retell how it happened. it's such a unique device that other movies have obviously implemented since. But you got to also remember, in 1944, a lot of these things that these movies are doing is the first time they've ever been done. And
Mm.
so, if it seems almost like a cliche, it's not, because it's the first one. So I thought it was definitely interesting how that framing device of I killed him, here's what happened, and then tells
Yeah.
the story as a narrator. I think it's a brilliant use of narration as well.
And that's yeah, exactly. And that's what's really cool about watching classics, because sure, you watch movies today and maybe they're bigger and they have a bigger budget, and they can maybe wow you more from that standpoint, but exactly what you said, like these are kind of like original, like true originals a lot of the times. And actually that device Billy Wilder uses again in Sunset Boulevard, where you have the foreshadowing to the end. And you're like, oh, how does that happen? How does that come to pass?
Right, and yeah, it starts with the main character. I don't want to spoil that movie, but it starts with something that happens at the end of the movie. They start with the end, and I think it's just such a unique thing that he only mastered as his career went on. Because this is one of his earlier films. I believe it is his debut, right?
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think it's his very first movie. No.
Yeah, maybe not, but it's one of them for sure. And I just think that's interesting because, Billy Wilder is considered one of our greatest filmmakers of all time. And to see him so early on in his career with no budget, committing to this, really nailing it on one of the first goes, I think it's definitely impressive. What do you think of the actual murder itself? Because I think that is such an exciting scene where they're actually trying to cover it up. I love that.
I mean, it was it's a really genius way that they do it. And so, I mean, because that happens kind of I think in the middle of the movie a little bit.
Yeah,
and
I think it's directly at the halfway point. Yeah.
You're wondering if this is actually going to go down because you hear him say, I did this, and stuff. And then you're like, is this actually going to happen? Or maybe this falls apart, and I don't know. But when you actually see it happen, I feel bad for the guy. I'm conflicted, because at one point, Phyllis, I think her name is, in the movie, she Barbara Stanwyck's character,
Phyllis.
She says that he hit her and stuff, but then later in the movie you find out from her daughter that she might actually not be the sanest person to conspire with. And but specifically talking about that scene you're talking about where he kills him, then they, he impersonates him with the crutches and goes on the train. He tries to hide himself to, his back's to people. And he just tries to not say it much, but say key things that just and even before the murder, he's going around well, this is how you commit murder successfully. You have to have phone records. So you make certain calls at specific times. And
yeah, he's creating his alibi before it even happens. Yeah.
Which is amazing. So, just
yes. I think it's really interesting that this whole first half is all building anticipation of how they're going to pull this murder off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think almost the most intriguing half to me is the second half where you see how do they get away with it or not get away with it. My favorite scene in the whole movie is when the guy who actually saw him on the train is one of the witnesses brought in, and and you see Neff, played by Fred McMurray, kind of shying away from him, almost trying not to be seen, not to be heard, especially because you saw it that they spoke, so he obviously knows his voice. And when he finally recognizes him, and it's that split second of are they gonna say he did it? Is he gonna get away with it? And the fact that he does, it's one of those moments where you hold your breath, and because he's calling him at the end that he's not discovered right then and there, but it doesn't matter because in the moment you're still nervous for him. And I think that's great, where where the movie's headed. You've already seen what happens afterwards, but you're still anticipating it and you're still anxious about it. And I think that's just Billy Wilder's direction is just superb in that moment. And Fred McMurray's performance. I mean, all the performances in this are so good because you have people who are kind of this anti-hero. They're good, you root for them, but they're also really bad and they're flawed. And especially rewatching it now to know that Phyllis has some crazy motives as well, how that'd be different rewatching it. Because neither of us have seen any of these films. First off, just blanket statement. None of us. This was first watches for all of us, for all these. And then you have Keyes being this kind of not father figure, but this mentor. Really loves Neff. He kind of has him under his wing. Neff always says love you too. There's this really great bond, and to know that he's being deceived, but also you don't want Neff to be figured out, but at the same time he's going to call him at the end. It's just all this involved in interweaving stuff. Yeah.
It's like perfect Breaking Bad here, where I'm just because it's, that show, you're like trying to figure out like, when do you fall off the main character? Do you ever fall off the main character? For me, I never did.
Mhm.
But for a lot of people, they're like, this part was where I fell off. And like for me, I never fell off this main character either,
Right.
even though I was kind of like I never wanted him to get caught, but I felt weird about it.
Mhm.
But yeah, exactly like what you were talking about, like, which I think was such a great thing to do, is in the second half, like just having like everything is done and over with, and he's just trying not to get caught, trying to get that payout. And he slowly starts to like, try to evade people finding out. But this insurance agency is kind of like they're detectives almost.
Yeah.
And it's like they're slowly like, hey, wait a second.
Putting
This
the
is
pieces
weird.
together. Yeah.
And then he's like, he can't really do anything to prevent. I mean, what are you going to do at that point when people start discovering things? You can't really cover it up.
And it's hard when you're by yourself, opposed to with another person, and he has a whole nother person, which we'll get to in a sec. Like, this relationship also plays a huge part into it, because the whole motive of it is so that they can live happily together.
Right.
But then you realize it's not really the motive, and the second half, after it's done, it almost pushes them further apart. It really takes a toll on its relationship, because now his top priority is no longer her. It's this murder. It's this event, and it's a struggle. And you see that this relationship tears apart because of it. And even whether or not Phyllis was in love with him or not, we don't really know for sure. But it's very clear that that relationship, what they thought would fix it, really is the reason it broke up. And I think that's insanely profound, and something that I hadn't seen a lot in these, especially these genre films where it's all about the style. To bring that much substance to it, it was really impressive.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say that she wasn't in love with him.
Yeah, I mean, that's
she does shoot him at one point. So,
but even then, it's like, before this murder, was she actually like falling for him? And then this was just kind of like, now this is done. It's like, oh, I got to get back to my main priority. Who knows? And that's probably my optimist.
She seems sure, but she's kind of like a psychopath a little bit. She wanted to kill her husband for money, and then she shoots this guy. I don't know. She seemed like a crazy lady.
And I mean, we got to talk about the style itself, like the noir style. I think a lot of people said Maltese Falcon was like the father of it, the birth of it. But I think this was really what mastered the vintage noir blueprint. Like, I think this is the film that is the blueprint for future noir films to follow. Like, I really do think this one just nailed it in terms of the shadowing, because it's all about that darkness, like the shadows, and what's seen, what's not seen, and it parallels to the characters. What is seen, what's under the nose, and what's completely hidden in the shadows. There's a lot of great parallels to that too. Just a really well directed and shot movie. Especially, again, like I brought up earlier, the train sequence itself is just so awesome to watch. It's just so well choreographed. And for you to say, you said that he was it was one of the easiest films for him to shoot. He got a lot of it in one take, in a few takes, is impressive, because it looks like it had more time spent on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is probably close to like a perfect movie, I think. So
especially for its genre and its time, for sure. So I think do you want to get into what Oscars it won?
Absolutely.
Well, that's it. It didn't win any.
Ain't that some shit?
Yeah, and that's what's crazy about not crazy, because they had their own reasons for voting for what they voted for, but a lot of the time in these genre films, we even see it nowadays. Like, for the fact that Get Out got nominated, it was a shock to people. Black Panther, because these are genre films for a very specific audience that not everyone is going to necessarily embrace. When they see it, they embrace it, but they don't necessarily seek them out, because they're very niche genres, whether it's horror, in this case noir, Black Panther's case superhero. And I think it's interesting that it didn't win any. It was nominated for 7 awards: Best Picture, Best Director, of course, for Billy Wilder, Best Actress for Barbara Stanwyck, Best Screenplay, Best Black and White Cinematography, because back then there was black and white and color cinematography, Best Score, and Best Sound. So again, there's some omissions there that I'm surprised by. Fred McMurray not getting nominated.
Right.
The art direction, aka production design, I think should have been nominated. Like, I think there's a lot of things about this that are really well done, that it could have been nominated more for, but I'm not surprised because of the time period, because it is such a niche genre of film. It makes sense. Maybe
the idea of murdering your spouse wasn't fun back then. I don't know.
Right. I mean, yeah. Murdering your spouse. Let's talk about something that might be a little different than murdering, but what about gaslighting your spouse? What about
Oh,
segue?
mm,
So now we're
that's
moving on
also
to
bad.
the 1944 film Gaslight.
Mhm.
This one did win some Oscars, and I think it is a little bit more accessible. But again, I would argue it's a bit more of an unconventional choice for the time. Chad, why don't you talk to us about Gaslight?
Yes, this is a very interesting movie. Gaslight, directed by George Cukor, written by John Van Druten, Walter Reich, and John L. Balderston. Music by Bronislaw Kaper. Cinematography by Joseph Ruttenberg. Starring Ingrid Bergman, Charles Boyer, Joseph Cotton, Mae Whitty, and Angela Lansbury. Fun facts: this was Angela Lansbury's debut role.
Yeah.
We will see Joseph Cotton again in later movies. A later movie. Gaslight was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry in 2019. It was based on a 1938 play called Gaslight, 2 words, movie's just 1 word, by Patrick Hamilton. And the play and movie originated the term gaslighting, which refers to a form of psychological abuse in which the victim is gradually manipulated into doubting their own sanity. Plot: a woman is slowly manipulated into believing she is going insane by her husband. Yeah, so I can just go straight into this. This movie is insane. It's also a noir,
Yep.
but I really enjoyed this one. It's one where a lot of the things that happen are subtle, but that's kind of like how gaslighting is. Like it kind of shows you how over years and years and years of doing these things subtly, it can really start to, because you would think like, oh, well, if someone said that I'm not going to, that I'm a certain way, I'll just say, no, no, I'm not. But, if someone like keeps doing this and they're believable enough and they're close to you, you're going to be familiar with them and stuff. So basically what happens is, woman marries this guy and, they move into a house in, I believe, London. And he slowly just starts to, and you're not sure why at first. Oh, I forgot to say it begins with a murder. But later, but later, they move back into the house where the murder occurred, and he slowly starts to, just say things like, oh, you're very forgetful, you lose things easily, and come to find out, he also uses her mom's mental past, health past, against her to make her feel like maybe she's going insane.
Like it's genetic almost. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he's making her feel like she's forgetful and stuff. So like when he actually starts doing the things that he wants to do, she won't believe what she's hearing and seeing. And so that's what happens. But then like this kind of like made like a term that we use all the time now for these things that happen in real life.
Yeah, it's almost like pathological liars, how if they keep lying over and over, they start to believe their own lie, except it's worse because it's someone else telling you the lie and making you believe a lie that you're not even making up. So it's someone basically forcing this false truth on you, and eventually you're manipulated into thinking it's true yourself. It's really interesting that this is a term that is frequently used. I mean,
today,
some movies I saw last year, I was like, oh, wow, this is a great example or not a great example of gaslighting. And it's just one of those things where you wouldn't think it would stem from a movie. But back then, like we said, with Double Indemnity and noir films, this is a trendsetter. This is what kind of built this idea of, manipulation. Especially in 1944, it's honestly surprising that a movie that is so much about, painting men as villains in a sense, and women showing that they have to make sure they don't get manipulated and kind of standing up for women's rights. It's honestly impressive that they were able to tell this kind of story in 1944, because this is before I think society as a whole was getting more and more progressive, so the fact that this was a theme they were tackling back then, about abuse that isn't even physical, that's completely mental, is really, really impressive. And for its time, the themes it brings to it. Yeah, and we got to talk, of course, about Ingrid Bergman's performance herself.
Absolutely.
He said I was going out of my mind.
You're not going out of your mind. You're slowly and systematically being driven out of your mind.
But why? Why?
Yes, I mean, she just plays the victim role so well. Just like how she slowly just starts to let him, get into her basically. And I like to kind of like think that this is kind of like a real life form of Inception almost, where he's trying to get her to believe something that's his idea, but make her think that this was with her all along, and she is this person that he's painting her out to be. And it slowly kind of does make her insane. There are times when even people show up, like this detective shows up, played by Joseph Cotton. He comes in and he's trying to figure out what the hell is going on because people keep telling him things, and he basically figures it all out. But even when he shows up and he tells her what's going on, he leaves, and then she's told by her husband again that didn't actually happen. And she's like, "Oh shit, that didn't actually happen. Maybe I'm going crazy." And then he has to show up again for her to actually believe it. That's how damaged she became from this.
Yeah, and she sells it so well to where you. And this is probably almost one of the things I have against the film, is that it's very obvious from an early point in the film that he is doing what he's doing. I think they set up this, or at least it was to me, at the end, and maybe it's because gaslighting as a term is like a very well-known term, that when you're watching a movie called Gaslight, you kind of know that he's messing with her the whole time. But like later on in the film, there's this big reveal that he's like up in the attic and it was him all along, and it's one of those things where I knew it was him all along. From the second she pulls out the note and he's kind of told her, put it away. I was like, oh, so he's the one who wrote the note.
Where did you find that?
In this score, she must have left it here. It's written by somebody called Sergius Bauer.
Give it to me.
Like, for me, I figured it out right away. And it's interesting because Double Indemnity does kind of the same thing where right away what happens. But for some reason, the way it's structured, they still find a way to make it interesting. Whereas at this point, I feel like it took a little long to get to the big reveal when I kind of knew he was behind it the whole time, and it was just kind of like, all right, when are we going to get to the next step? And it was obviously this progression of her going kind of insane and going crazy and not believing it, but I wanted almost to get to that sooner because it was very obvious from early on that he was gaslighting her. But again, back then, before this was a term, before the gaslighting was a known concept, I'm sure people were surprised that the father was, or the husband was, the one who was kind of pulling all the strings for a little while. Like, I bet they didn't put two and two together. So it's definitely interesting watching it from a modern perspective, being like, oh no, he's totally messing with her, and having to watch it go on and on and on. It's tough to watch because it's so emotionally draining, because she's so good in the performance that she like brings out all that terror. It's a hard watch, but I do think it's such an impactful watch for society and for the term itself. It coined this term. It's a major landmark thematically for sure. Even if the movie itself didn't reel me in all the time, it definitely did have its importance, and I definitely acknowledge that.
I mean, yeah. So like, this movie's kind of like a horror movie in a way, because like she believes her house might be haunted. Because the term gaslighting, it's because the gas in her room, the lights go down, and so she's like, someone else is turning lights on, and she's like, the housekeepers aren't doing it, so she's thinking it must, and she hears noises from upstairs. She thinks it might be a ghost or something like that, and come to find out it's just the guy, her husband, searching for the jewels that her aunt left or whatever, that are, I guess, on the dress. But yeah, I actually, it's interesting, because I watched it. I think I felt a little bit of a different way because, yes, I knew what gaslighting meant. And I knew that he was going to be the one gaslighting her. I didn't think it was going to be the other way around or someone else doing it to her. I knew that was going to be the dynamic. But, given that, I felt like, yeah, I mean, it was like a slow kind of like painstaking watch of watching him do this to her. And like you said, it's a hard watch. But I felt like that's important to actually ingrain like how damaging this can be and how slow the progression of this is. And it's not unbelievable stuff. It's just like slowly after time of repeating the same things to her. You lose things all the time. You lost this, you lost that, you lost that. And then like, where, who took that painting off the wall? And it's just torture in a way. And just like, yeah, I mean, it just really, I think just hammers in that gaslighting very well.
Yeah, and like you said, yeah, it's almost tortuous. It's like it's repetitive. It repeats itself. It continues on and on. And honestly, that's probably why by the end of it, I was drained. I was kind of like,
Yeah.
wow, that was a lot. And I think that's a merit for the film itself. Like, as much as I sound like I'm saying it was an unpleasant watch and I didn't like it, it was an unpleasant watch because it was good and I liked it.
Right.
You know, obviously, because of the slow burn, the pacing itself is not going to have the same pacing as some of these other movies. But I do think, you know, this is just really well structured, really, like you said, hammers home the exact points it's trying to make and the exact commentaries it's trying to make. Also the cast, we talked about Ingrid Bergman, but Charles Boyer is or Boyer, I don't know if it's French or not, is a good villain here. I didn't like his character from the start, and that might be another issue with me too, is with the movie for me too, is also because, you know, I feel like it would almost be a little more impactful if you do like him a little bit more, so then it is a bit more of a turn. But from the get-go, I was like, I don't trust this guy, and I guess that kind of just
That's an
again, like I said,
thought, yeah.
Again, that just might be the term gaslight just hanging over and me being like, oh, he's bad news from the beginning, just me knowing because of what the title is. Yeah, just unfortunate. But yeah, Joseph Cotton's great. Dame May Whitty has some of my favorite moments. Like, I almost picked her. We'll get to our actress later.
Is she the biscuit lady?
She's the neighbor who's always trying to come in and say hi. She wasn't the person I picked.
I call her the biscuit lady.
She wasn't. That's great. She wasn't the person I picked for best actress, but she probably gives, out of all these 5 movies, she probably gives my favorite performance. It's not the best performance, but it's my favorite because I
nosy neighbor.
Every time she's on screen, I just light up and I'm always just like, oh, I love this lady. And the fact that she's a dame, that she got that recognition, that she was honored. Is she knighted? Is that the term?
I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, she's a dame though, and good
Sir
for her.
And dame.
Yeah, exactly. Angela Lansbury, great. I mean, this is Miss Potts years and years before Miss Potts happened. This is Miss Lovett and Sweeney Todd before that happened on Broadway. Like, this is before what was the mystery show she was on? Murder, She Wrote, I think it's called.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, like such a great. Murder, She Wrote. Just such a great career, and she's even popping up and stuff now in Mary Poppins Returns. She's the balloon lady at the end. Like, she is in so many things, and to see her now younger, but she still has that voice that is so recognizable.
We were surprised to see her. Myself and the wife, we often like to look up people in the movies we watch, and she's like, "Do you know that's Angela Lansbury?" I was like, "No." Awesome.
Yeah, like she's got just such a distinct personality and persona, and like her character's not the most likable either, but there's just an energy about her that even if you don't like her, she still like kind of commands the screen and makes it her, makes her presence her own. And yeah, I really like her performance as well. I just think it's a very consistent, solid movie, that does its job perfectly well.
Yep.
So Gaslight, as I said, did win 2 awards. It won Best Actress for Ingrid Bergman, and it won Best Art Direction, black and white. There was another art direction black and white versus art direction color, and it won art direction black and white, which I think is interesting because you have all those little jewels and all those little props up in that attic. I think that really elevates production design. Also the ballroom scene itself, like the house, it's very well designed, all the paintings. It was nominated for 5 other awards: Best Picture, Charles Boyer for Best Actor, Angela Lansbury for Best Supporting Actress on her debut, Best Screenplay, and Best Black and White Cinematography. So really good crop of nominations. Didn't get a director nomination, so that probably wasn't a favorite to win Best Picture. It probably wasn't in the conversation, but again, really solid movie, won 2 great awards. Ingrid Bergman, I'd say well-deserved. We'll get later when we give out our own acting prizes. She may pop up there. Who knows? Anything else on Gaslight?
No, I think that's it.
All right, why don't we just go our way to the next movie?
That was
a really bad segue. Chad, you might have to start coming up with some segues because I'm not doing so hot.
Yeah, I'll try it out. We'll see.
I'm not as hot as the gaslight is burning. But let's move on to Going My Way,
yes.
The Best Picture winner of that year. Chad, tell us about it.
Going My Way, directed by Leo McCarey, written by Frank Butler and Frank Cavett. 2 Franks, right? Really? Music by Robert Emmett Dolan. Cinematography by Lionel Linden. Starring Bing Crosby, Barry Fitzgerald, Frank McHugh, James Brown, not that one, Jean Heather, also in Double Indemnity, Gene Lockhart, Porter Hall, also in Double Indemnity, wow. Fortunio Bonanova, and I don't know how to say this last name, but like Rize Stevens. Fun facts, Bing Crosby sings a lot of songs in this movie, including Three Blind Mice, Silent Night, 2 Ralu Roll, An Irish Lullaby, Ave Maria, and Going My Way. another Best Picture nominee, The Belle of St. Mary, serves as a sequel to Going My Way and stars Bing Crosby and Ingrid Bergman. So there you go.
So we will cover it on the show when we get to 1945. That's crazy.
Absolutely, yeah. Basic plot: new young priest takes over a parish from an old established veteran.
Yeah,
that's pretty much all this movie is about.
Yeah, it's kind of about the old versus the new. What we change, how we change structures to better the lives of the people who we are providing service for. Obviously, he makes the choir, and then he goes his way at the end. He does.
Yep, he
and that's
comes in, he performs service, and then he leaves.
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple. And I think we didn't talk a lot about it with the Double Indemnity and Gaslight because they're just kind of like their own like genre films, really cool. But these next three films I want to talk about in the context of the year itself, because this is very clearly, from what I've read, very clearly a way to kind of cheer people up and give them some sort of hope in the midst of this wartime era. We saw a lot of musicals coming out this time. Bing Crosby blew up as a star because of this movie. It's one of those movies that's meant to really put a smile on your face. And as most musicals are, unless it's like Les Mis or I'm blanking on some others, but obviously there are more, like even West Side Story. Like, most of the time, at least for these classic musicals, they're meant to put a smile on your face. The Singing in the Rain, the American in Paris is. This is definitely in a different vein of musical than those, because obviously it's black and white. The songs themselves are not really these huge song and dance numbers. It's more of just songs they're singing in their world, which I think is interesting. Chad, what did you think of the musical aspect itself and that sense of escapism within the time period?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's every time, Bing telegraphs that he's about to start a song, it's kind of obvious. And then, but you know what? I didn't hate it. He's got a great voice. I'm not sure about him as a person, actually, but, him singing those songs was pretty beautiful. Coming in, young, kind of hip, new priest, basically trying to change things up and show that, you can, you don't have to just like look the other way when the young little ruffians are, stealing turkeys. You can actually just make them like ask them to be in a choir with you.
Right. And it's taking a different route than the discipline that they're used to taking, and a lot of stories centered around church and the youth can sometimes be a darker story. So the fact that it's not that, Father Fitzgibbon is not that kind of priest. He's not, it's nothing illegal, but it's also like there's a clear disconnect of his era and the era of the kids underneath him. So it is nice to see this new blood kind of come in and take over. Yeah.
I mean, back then we had a very different idea of what priesthood and relationship with children is, so that is what it is. Another kind of weird thing that I not I, but the wife noticed is that the whole plot's kind of weird. It centers around them trying to save the mortgage for the church, like it's running out of money, but that really doesn't make much sense, I don't think, because like the Catholic Church pays for the churches. Like, what?
It's an interesting, like you said, the plot's a little weird because you do have that plot, but then you also have the idea of Father Fitzgibbon. There's this lie that he's not telling him that he's really taking over. He's almost acting as his assistant. Then there's a plot line with the choir. Then there's a plot line of the romance that blossoms. And there's just a lot of different plots that are kind of circling around. They play golf at a point. Like it's interesting. I love the golf scene. It's great. I'm watching him kind of throw it in the hole and be like, "You got a hole in one!" Like, it's really sweet. But it's interesting because there are so many different things going on, but it's hard to say exactly what the overall picture is besides what you said earlier. It's a guy coming in, changing some shit and leaving. And it's simple, but it's interesting because this is the highest grossing movie of that year. And I think it's just because people saw a musical starring Bing Crosby. I want to go to it. I want to sit down. I don't want to worry about the war. And it did that job. What were you about to say, Chad? Because it seems like a fun thought.
You made me think when you brought up the golf thing, because like, I think they let the father win. And then the next scene or some scenes later, like Bing and the old father, they're playing checkers and he's like, duk, 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 duk. And you're like, I thought he was going to let him win.
Well, because you think the whole time that's where they're going, but then they don't. And honestly, I think those are the pockets. I think this movie has a lot of nice pockets of good moments that make me smile. Like the songs themselves are good. The scene where he's teaching the kids to sing is really charming, especially coming from a background of growing up with choirs.
Ba,
Got that? Let me hear it now. Oh, I thought we had some singers here. I want to hear everybody in this section.
When I was young, there were 3 juggling balls. One was theater, one was being a music teacher, and one was film critic, Dylan. And it was me deciding what I wanted to do with my life. I chose theater for college. I chose film criticism as like this side thing that I'm doing. But that the choir and music teacher dream kind of slipped away, and it's because some things have to give or take. But it was nice to kind of see those moments and kind of be like, oh, like I love that, and it warmed my heart.
Let's hear it.
You also have those moments between Father Fitzgibbon and Chuck O'Malley, you know, those moments like the checkers and the golf. And even when he finally does return after that rainy night when he leaves and then he comes back and they have the conversation, you know, those are the pockets of moments that I really like. Unfortunately, though, there's a lot of other stuff that just is a little bit of a chore to get through. And it may just be because I'm just not super knowledgeable about like religion, especially at that time. And like those themes are just not the most particularly interesting to me, but yeah, it just seemed like there were great moments, but the overall it did take a little while between some parts. Like it took a little while. We don't get our first song till I think 35 minutes in. You know, it's not your traditional musical in that sense. So
yeah, I mean, I do kind of see, like, I was having trouble like putting my thoughts together, but like when you talk about how it's a little bit disconnected and, you know, not everything doesn't come together, you know, in the best of ways, but I did really like the relationship, because I'm glad you brought that up, the relationship between the two fathers, because it's just, yeah, like that scene when, you know, he's basically trying to make him feel better, and he brings out the Irish whiskey and tells him about his homeland, and he sings the Tu Ralu Ralu Rule song and for him, and then he tells him about his mom that he hasn't seen in a very long time, and then you get one of the cutest moments in movie history, I think, is when as a gift, O'Malley brings Fitzgibbon's mother from Ireland so that they can embrace, and they do, and it's very adorable.
Yeah, that moment's great. It honestly reminds me of one of my favorite movies from a few years ago, Paddington 2, because that movie ends on one of my favorite endings of all time. I'm going to spoil a little bit of it just because it's a movie you all should see, so if you don't want to hear this, like skip a minute. Earmuffs. I will wave when I'm done spoiling it, but it ends with Paddington feeling like he's failed and kind of coming to terms with it, and then his family saying, go answer the door, and the doorbell rings, and he opens the door, and it's his Aunt Lucy that he's been trying to give this beautiful present for. He spends a whole movie trying to find her a birthday present, and he fails in doing that, but it turns out the present all along was them flying her out there. And it honestly reminded me of this, where he turns around and he sees her, and then he gets choked up. No words are spoken, and I think that is why, again, like I said, the whole of the movie for me just lulls a little bit. It drags on for me a little. It's a little too long, but the pockets, the moments that do succeed, really do. And this is one of those endings, I think, especially, it ended perfectly, because this whole movie, you're not meant to hate Father Fitzgibbon, but you're not supposed to particularly love him in the beginning, but then you grow to love him. So when he finally gets that at the end, it's such a satisfying moment. I do think Paddington 2 does it a little bit better, but, you know, this is a parallel I noticed. And any movie that ends with someone seeing someone they haven't seen in a long time and embracing them, I guess I'm just a big fan of. The movie Lion from 2016, like other movies like that, just, I love them. So
very cute connection there, Dyl. Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I teased earlier on the phone.
Paddington 2.
Oh yeah, Paddington 2 conversation is over. So Going My Way was nominated for 10 Oscars, and this is what we'd like to call a sweep. It was not a clean sweep. It was not a clean sweep in the sense that it didn't win everything, but it won 7 out of 10 Oscars, which is huge. That's 70% of the Oscars it was nominated for. It won Best Picture. It won Best Director. It won Best Actor for Bing Crosby. It won Best Supporting Actor for Barry Fitzgerald. It won Best Screenplay. It won Best Original Motion Picture Story. I don't know how that's any different than screenplay, but it is. It won Best Song for Swingin' on a Star. And it was nominated for Black and White Cinematography, Film Editing, and for Best Actor, Barry Fitzgerald. As we said earlier, he was nominated for Supporting and Lead. Lost to Bing Crosby in Lead, but then won Supporting. He had quite a year. Imagine. So those are all the awards. This very long movie won. As I said, it's long, but I think there are nice moments throughout that keep it watchable.
This is a fan favorite for sure, I guess.
A lot of people liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, but speaking of long movies, This next movie is a very long movie. Well, I guess not that long, but it's like 3 hours long.
Yeah, I mean,
It's-
hey, that was the best segue of the day so far, by the way, Chad. So
Thanks.
keep that up.
It's Since You Went Away,
Yeah, Since
directed
You Went
by
Away.
John Cromwell, the guy who apparently hosted the Oscars, but his film didn't win.
Mhm.
Written by David O. Selznick, music by Max Steiner, cinematography by Stanley Cortez and Lee Garms, starring Claudette Colbert, Jennifer Jones, Joseph Cotton, remember him, Shirley Temple, Monty Woolley, Lionel Barrymore, heard of him, Robert Walker, and Hattie McDaniel.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, this cast is just so good. We'll get there in a sec once you give your plot synopsis.
Sure.
But we'll get into the cast, because this cast is stacked.
Yeah. Fun facts. Based on the 1943 novel Since You Went Away, Letters to a Soldier from His Wife by Margaret Buell Wilder. Plot. An epic about an American home front during World War II where a wife and her 2 daughters try and get by while their husband and father goes to fight the war.
Yeah. So like you said, it's a wartime movie. This is the movie that most hands-on tackles what was going on at the time. And I think it's interesting because the past 3 movies, Double Indemnity and Gaslight, fun genre films, Going My Way is an escapist musical. This was like very much like, no, this is what's going on today.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting because most war films are about the soldiers in the war itself. So to have a movie that's all about the other people, for a movie-going audience, those are the people who are relating to it most. Like, I think it's interesting that they have a movie about the people who stay home and what it means to lose someone and have this absence in life. Sometimes, as we see in this film, not even knowing if they're alive or not, knowing that they might be gone, but we don't know for certain. There's a lot of really crazy trauma that comes with that I think is conveyed well. As I teased earlier, this cast, first off, is stacked. Claudette Colbert, came off of It Happened One Night. It happened one night where she, that movie swept picture, director, actor, actress, like screenplay. It's one of the 3 movies to get the big 5 next to Silence of the Lambs and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So she's coming off some great movies. Joseph Cotton, as we said earlier, is in one of these movies. Shirley Temple is literally one of the most iconic of this era, and this is one of her older roles. This is one of the roles when she actually grew up. I remember watching a lot of her movies when I was young, of her as a little girl, so it was interesting to see her as like a tween, I guess. She's not a teenager yet.
One of the early child stars.
Yeah, it's like when people see Judy Garland for the first time in something that's not Wizard of Oz, it's like, that was the little girl who played Dorothy, and it's like, yeah, she was a kid, but now she's an adult or a teenager. And then Hattie McDaniel, of course, the first African-American person to win an Oscar for, I don't know for any, I think she's the first person to win for anything, for Gone with the Wind. So she is, exceptional. Like, this cast is really, really solid across the board. Chad, give your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I just kind of wanted to touch on, and I'm sure we will get more, we will talk more about this when we talk about another film, Gone with the Wind, but I did want to kind of touch on the fact that, Hattie McDaniel was actually not treated that well during this time. Like, she was in these movies, and I feel like a lot of this dialogue and speech that they give her are maybe a little stereotypical. And then also, I heard, when I was reading up a little bit on like her life, they wouldn't even let her attend the ceremonies a lot of the time. So I just wanted to note that. But
yeah, it's important. We're looking at the movies themselves, but it's important to acknowledge, because this is an Oscar show. The award shows are flawed. We just came off of some huge news about the Golden Globes. Like, these are not always like perfect ceremonies, and I think it's definitely important to hold them accountable. So thank you for doing that, Chad. I think it is very important to bring that up. As good as she is, and as good as this cast is, and as good as this movie is, she, it's important to recognize that maybe some people aren't treated as fairly on set, and it's a problem. And I'm glad it has improved. It still is not fully resolved, but that is a very important thing to note.
Yeah, and it's really just kind of interesting to note when you're watching a lot of these films from the classic era, the 1940s. It almost, for me, a lot of the time seems just like a foreign movie, like a different world, a different time when, people were just not, some people just weren't treated, as they should have been. And, but other than that, it also just shows, how people, were in this time. And that, that's kind of what this movie does, when, you hear about people during wartime, providing their homes for soldiers to stay in. I mean, that sounds insane to me. Like, I would never do that. But back then, people did stuff like that. And this is, kind of what this movie is about, is like this family, they're all saddened about their husband, going to war, and they're just trying to cope with it. And then they find, certain relationships about, and they call him uncle, but he's kind of a love interest of the main
friend almost, yeah,
character. And, then an older man comes to stay with them, and then his grandson is going into the war and becomes a love interest of one of the daughters. And there's like this cool little arc about the relationship between that old man and a dog.
Yeah.
At first,
I was gonna say, yeah, there's a lot of great little arcs, and the difference I think between this and like Going My Way is that those arcs don't necessarily always come together, but this one it kind of does, because it's like they're all experiencing the same thing, but each of them has their own little moments and their own little stories within this bigger story. Because the bigger picture is, war's happening. We're housing this soldier here at home, and soldiers are coming in and out, and we are left without our father/husband. But then it's like about those little things, like you said, with the dog, and like the relationship between I'm missing her name, Jane and Bill. Yeah,
okay.
Jane and Bill.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see how people live on the other side of the line. It's not the people at war; it's the people at home. The dog stuff is great because it's almost like the comedy relief, because this is a heavy movie. It is drama. It's a lot about the loneliness that they feel, and there is bits of happiness found throughout. But overall, it is pretty sad because they are lonely, they are alone, they are fending for themselves. But this dog thing, it's hilarious, and Monty Woolley was nominated for an Academy Award for his performance. Because he does bring a lot of heart and comedy. Yeah, I mean, it's just a really well done movie. I like the romance, particularly between Jane and Bill, the best.
Yes.
But I did read, actually, the two actors are actually in real life at the time were married, but they were going through a bitter breakup because Jennifer Jones, who plays Jane, was having an affair with the producer.
Oh my God!
So they were in the process of a breakup. The divorce happened not long after.
That's a fun fact.
The production was wrapped, and the director of Airplane has specifically said that scene at the train station where she is waving goodbye to him was directly stolen, shot for shot, for Airplane.
Have your picture taken as soon as you get there and send me one. Have your picture taken the minute you get there and send me one. Okay, here, hurry. Oh!
Okay, here, hurry.
Oh, but it's your watch. You shouldn't. You'll need it.
But it's your watch. You shouldn't. You're going to need this.
Even in 1980, this film is still relevant. As you said, there are some stereotypes that are played into it. But again, I think Hattie McDaniel does have some nice moments too, when she's putting the presents under the tree because that's what the dad wanted. And it's like almost like, like she remembered all these months later to do that.
He sent me something too. Mr. Hilton never forgot me, even when he's fighting them devils.
She has some great moments. Like, I think this cast itself works really well together. And if I had to pick a best ensemble of all these movies, this is probably the best ensemble, I think, because I think every member of the family has their own moments to shine, but they work so well cohesively because they have to be a unit. They have to be they have to be on the same page. And I think that's definitely a beautiful moment, especially given what the world was going through in 1944. I think some people needed this film to be like, you're not alone. And, we understand what you're going through. And like, here's a cute dog, but also here's some tears you can cry out, and here's it appeals to every person who's experiencing that type of trauma. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you basically said it all.
Yeah.
I love that love story between the two feuding real life people.
And I like how it's not from the stem. It's not from the beginning of the movie. Earlier, she's crushing on the uncle that likes her mom. Because it's almost like that childhood, like when Elvis walks in the room and all the teenage girls are going crazy, even though he's twice their age. It's like that admiration for an older figure. But then it's like Rogan and Logan. I just watched X-Men for the first time a few weeks ago. So like it's like that, like the older figure that you're crushing on. But then when Bill comes into her life, seeing that relationship blossom. And again, it's a long movie, but I think because it's so long, you have a lot of time to really build these relationships and show every single angle of this experience and story.
Yeah, actually, that does actually kind of reminds me. It is a little long, and I personally felt that it definitely could have been cut maybe 45 minutes out of it, to be honest, and it could have been a lot tighter. And it has a kind of interesting, but also kind of weird and maybe misplaced for me, where, it had this, because it doesn't feel like a movie that would have an orchestral opening, thing. It's not a musical. Right. And then not even like halfway, but kind of like 2/3, like almost when the movie's like almost over,
Right.
they have like an intermission.
And then
And I'm
on
just
track,
like,
yeah.
what?
Yeah,
So I
it's interesting. I think that might just be like a lot of classic epics. Like you said, it's an epic, and I
Maybe.
think a lot of
Yeah.
people think of epics as like, huge battles and Lawrence of Arabia, but epic really, in terms of definition, I guess, is just the length. And so I guess if you
Yeah.
have a intermission, I guess it's more probably for the theater itself, like giving people a time
Right.
to go pee. um, it's interesting how we don't have them anymore, even though we still kind of have long movies nowadays. It's that's a good question, Chad. I don't know.
But I
it's
also think because like exactly what you said about like the term epic applying to like length, it just doesn't feel like an epic to me. Like,
Right.
I feel like maybe
Context-wise.
like Gone with the Wind, which I still haven't seen, is probably like this great epic movie, and then you have like There Will Be Blood, stuff like that. That's just like an actual, yes, long, but also you just feel like, I don't know. It's actually kind of hard to put into words,
Yeah.
but
Well, this is a much more intimate story too. It's mostly taking place in this house, and that's why it's interesting. I bet when people heard there was a war epic happening, a lot of people were like, "I'm not going because the war's going on. I don't want to see that." Some people were probably thinking, "Ooh, battle scenes," and then they show up and it's this family drama. They probably weren't
Right.
expecting it, Yeah, but I liked it. Yeah, I think it's definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that is long, but again, if the acting is good and the relationships are solid, and I thought they were, and the dog's cute, I think it's a watchable movie. One of these movies, the last movie we're saving for last, obviously, not necessarily. The length was a little bit more noticeable for that one for me, but we'll get there when we get there. Since You Went Away was nominated for 9 Oscars, so that was the third most of all these 5 movies. It only won 1. It won for Best Musical Score. So maybe they just knew the score was great, so they were like, we're going to put a whole prologue and entr'acte in there just to show it off more. Maybe that's what got it its win. Who knows? Best Picture, it was nominated for. It was nominated for Best Actress for Claudette Colbert, for Best Supporting Actor for Monty Woolley, the guy who loves the dog. Hates the dog, then loves the dog. Such a sweet relationship. I'm glad you brought that up. I can't stop thinking about it now. Best Supporting Actress for Jennifer Jones, the one who was waving goodbye that was eventually inspired the film Airplane. Best Black and White Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Interior Design, Black and White. That is the name of the title of the award. Best Film Editing, and Best Effects. Don't really know what those effects were, but there were effects and it was nominated. So, like I said, there's another movie that was also very long that we are going to talk about right now, and that is about a famous president, Mr. Woodrow Wilson. It is called Wilson. Chad, why don't you take us? Will you take us away, son? Wilson?
Yeah. Every time I think about this movie, I just think of Dennis the Menace going, Mr. Wilson.
Good point.
So, anyways, Wilson, directed by Henry King, written by Lamar Trotty, music by Alfred Newman, cinematography by Leon Shamroy, starring Alexander Knox, Charles Coburn, Geraldine Fitzgerald, Thomas Mitchell, Ruth Nelson, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Vincent Price, William Eighth, and Mary Anderson. Fun facts: Wilson was a box office bomb, and the film's producer, Daryl F. Zanuck, forbade his employees from mentioning the film in his presence, despite the critical success. Also, Wilson's daughter, Woodrow Wilson's daughter, Eleanor Wilson McAdoo, was an informal counselor. I imagine she's just kind of like, hey, that's accurate.
Right.
So, plot: it's a biography about Woodrow Wilson between the time as the head of Princeton University to his death, basically.
Yeah. And that's it. It's a biopic, and it's about his life. And again, a biopic kind of has to do a little bit more, something else for me to really like grasp it. And this just felt as standard as you could get. It's interesting. This is the only one of color of the 5.
Yep.
And I honestly thought that would make me a little bit more intrigued toward it. It didn't. And I think it's important to note in 1944, again, we got to bring in the time period. It's interesting that it was a box office bomb because, it's a very American story. You'd think Americans would just eat it all up. But maybe the climate of the time, they didn't want to watch a movie about a president while they're going through a world war. It's interesting to see exactly what they were in the mood for between this war film and Since You Went Away, this musical, a Gaslight, and then this. Like, it's very interesting to see what the different variety of movies was and like why this was a box office bomb. I'll let you give your thoughts before I share a fun fact, a fun story that I read somewhere. Chad, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's cool that you brought up that this is the only color movie in this slate of movies.
Right.
It's weird because like watching all the other ones in black and white, I kind of wish this one was also in black and white. I'm like, you don't need the color. I'm like,
Right.
But yeah, it's like you said, it's kind of just paint by numbers. I mean, there's not really much to say. I mean, the guy who plays Woodrow Wilson's pretty good. He gives a lot of great speeches. There's like a really cool boys choir moment, which I kind of found a little hard to believe. I'm like, is that the whole school and they're all fantastic at singing? Like, or is that just the choir from that school?
And he sings himself even in another scene,
Yeah.
like.
And then he does the thing where they show up and then they sing and they're like, the school songs and they're all proud and he's like, I can't remember what he says, but he's not very thankful or like, I'm glad you're here for me. He's like, I'm just gonna go prove and do my job.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he has such a long life to dissect, and there's so much. I've heard. I don't know much about Woodrow Wilson, but what I've read is that they really left out a lot of his life. They kind of showed the more positive angles of his presidency rather than the negatives. And we'll get into one negative that I know you pointed out that I, of course, saw.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's just a product of the time, but also kind of reflective of the things that they didn't show. There was one scene, which Chad, you'll tell us about in a sec. There was one scene that I think was more of a, how do I say this? Like, I feel like there was more of that kind of stuff involved in Woodrow Wilson's whole life in terms of just like race and that kind of stuff that they did shy away from because, it's an American Hollywood film about America and American president. They want to make it as positive as possible. But I think more modern movies have done a better job of making sure to not shy away from the flaws. And again, I don't know enough about Woodrow Wilson to know what those flaws were. And then the one time they do kind of put in something that is so jarring, that's meant to make you go, oh, that's not okay. Why are you clapping? Why are you applauding? It's over in a split second. So I think they're really trying to shy away from all that stuff and really kind of highlight the good. But then I feel like it kind of just feels a little not untruthful, but like we're not getting the full picture. Someone in a review said it almost felt like a postcard album you buy at the railroad station, which unfold like accordions and show you points of interest in the city. The producers must have known far more about Woodrow Wilson himself, but that is kept out of the movie in the same way that some sections are kept out of postcard albums. So, yeah, I definitely think that's interesting. Chad, why don't you tell us about that scene?
Well, I mean,
you pointed it out to me.
Yeah, I saw it and I went, oh, okay. And I had to go to the wife, like, did that just happen?
Yeah.
First, I wanted to say though, before I get into that, I mean, it's not really going to be that long, but I wanted to say you just spoke about how kind of like this film might not be the most accurate, kind of trying to highlight the good things, not the bad things. We're still doing this shit. I mean, Bohemian Rhapsody did that, and it really pissed me off. But that being said, going back to this part, okay, so basically what happens is he goes to see some sort of show, and I think it's like very like pro-America, stuff like that, but then you see a man in blackface. And, I mean, we've seen things like that happen in a way later, with like Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder, where it can be done kind of in a comedic, tasteful way.
And also as a commentary of why it's...
satire. Right. But this doesn't feel like that at all. And it just felt like just a mocking. And I think that's why this type of thing upsets people so much. But I feel like it was kind of commonplace back then. I mean, and
that's what's unfortunate.
The first talkie was, I think, the jazz singer, right?
Singer, yep. Al Jolson.
That's about a guy in blackface. So, it's...
Yeah, it's one of those things also, like you said, it seemed commonplace, but even then, like, we did talk about how there were some stereotypes in Since You Went Away that we saw with Hattie McDaniel's character, but it never got to this point. And I think that's the difference, is that, and especially this movie's in color, so it's even more... spotlight. I don't want to be hung up on this one moment because it is a split second. But it's one of those things that does take out the movie, especially in today's terms. And this is as much as we are looking at it in the lens of 1944, we have to look at it from the lens of 2021, looking at 1944. So that's important to note.
I mean, it's definitely worth noting, but in like this 2.5 hour movie, it's like a 30-second thing. So.
Yeah, what else did you think of the film itself? Just, again, like we said, standard biopic.
Paint by numbers. I mean, like, I liked learning more about like, things he did. They have a lot of like these little montages where, they just show like the little acts he signed and stuff. And you're like, oh, cool. Okay. That's good, type of a deal. And stuff like that. This kind of seems like, I don't know if this was post Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if maybe that's what they were going for with this kind of thing, but I feel like it didn't come like anywhere close for that. I think one of the cool things that I did really like about this movie, though, because it feels like I didn't like this movie really at all, because it just felt like a slog. Like, I'm like, okay, I get it.
It's boring. We can say it. It's boring.
It's pretty boring. But the cool things that I did like were a lot of the sequences that were like kind of clips from like back in the day, even like older than 1944, of like wartime and stuff like that, which I thought were really cool.
Yeah. So basically everything that was not written for this film was the best parts.
Kind of.
Yeah. Well, that kind of segues before we get into our rankings and all that, and talking about the Oscars. There's a funny story that I brought up earlier that I want to tell. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president at the time when this movie came out, and he screened this movie at the Second Quebec Conference with the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. And halfway through the movie, Winston Churchill said, "I'm unimpressed," and went to bed. So, I mean, if I can sit here and say it's boring and you all want to give me flack, fine. But just know that Winston Churchill, not Gary Oldman, the Winston Churchill, went to bed because he was so bored by this movie. So
Churchill has spoken.
If Churchill said it was boring, then I can say on air on this show that it was boring. If you made Wilson, you're probably dead by now. But if you love Wilson and you're a fan, I'm sorry if I offended you, but it's a slog for me. It's so boring. And it was one of the toughest ones because I watched these alphabetically and it was the last one I watched. And it kind of does feel like, we just got through 4 movies that like I could sit through fine. But like this one, and even in context, it's not even the longest one here, but it was the one that felt the length it's supposed to be.
Hey, that definitely was a really fun fact. I thought you were gonna say your dad was in this one too.
Right. Imagine. Oh my God, my dad's like 100 years old. All right. It was nominated for 5. Sorry, it was nominated for 10 awards. It won 5 awards. So this was the second biggest winner. There were only 3 movies that won more than 1 award. Gaslight won 2. Going My Way won 7. This won 5 awards. So some may even say this was the runner-up for Best Picture, even though nowadays there are movies that I think have had a better legacy and are more talked about. But at the time, this won the second most awards, and this was tied with Going My Way for nominations. So there's a good chance that it was probably a 2-way race between the two of them, and we'll get into that in just a sec. But it won Best Art Direction Color, it won Best Cinematography Color, it won Best Film Editing, Best Sound Recording, Best Writing Original Screenplay. It was nominated for Best Picture, nominated for Best Director, and nominated for Best Actor for Alexander Knox, and Best Musical Score and Best Effects. So it was nominated for a whole lot. And I forgot to mention this earlier, the Golden Globes, which mean nothing now, but we'll say it anyway because it was the only other award at the time. There was just the Oscars and Golden Globes. There was no Critics' Choice, no BAFTA, no SAG. At the time, Going My Way won Best Picture and Director at the Globes. Bergman won for Gaslight. What's his name? Barry Fitzgerald won Supporting Actor for Going My Way. The only thing that the Globes did differently than the Oscars was that Alexander Knox won Best Actor at the Globes. So he was the favorite because he was the only other award eligible. He was the favorite going into Oscar night for the award for Best Actor. So it's interesting that it didn't win that and Going My Way did sweep. But I would say because Alexander Knox was the frontrunner headed in and Wilson did end up picking up 5 awards, I'd argue it was probably at the time most people's runner-up, which is surprising in retrospect. Yeah. So that's all 5 movies. We covered them all. Now we're going to rank them from 5th to 1st. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to go in order. And let's see if we're more on the same page or if we differ again, because we have differed in the past. The first show, Shawshank Redemption, won. The second show, Nomadland, won. And we will see this time if we match up with the Oscars this time or not. Chad, what is your number 5?
We will see if you have been able to kind of predict my ranking here. It's number 5 is Wilson, for sure.
Yeah, my number 5 is Wilson. What is your number 4?
All right, same page. My number 4, Since You Went Away.
Okay, my number 4 is Going My Way.
All right. My number 3, Going My Way.
Okay, my number 3 is Gaslight.
Oh, okay. My number 2 is Gaslight.
And my number 2 is Since You Went Away, which means our number 1 is
Double
Double
Indemnity.
Indemnity. Yeah, so we both agreed with our number 1, which means we don't have to deliberate. We don't have to add anything else.
Perfect.
Our winner for this year, for 1944, is Double Indemnity, the only movie nominated here that did not win a single award. It won our award, and that's what matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Stands the test of time.
That's right. Who's talking about Wilson nowadays? Let's be honest. Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, it's interesting because we both put Going My Way in. You put it third, I put it fourth. It's interesting because that was the best picture, but I really do think the more genre films, Double Indemnity, Gaslight, and then Since You Went Away just spoke to my heart a lot. Just the different stories in the acting, I just really liked it. Maybe
It
also
seems like a you movie.
Yeah, especially with Shirley Temple too, just being like one of my favorite people to watch growing up. To see her older and to see
I need to
her,
watch more stuff with her in it for sure.
Yeah, I recommend the tap. If you just look up Shirley Temple staircase tap dance, there's a great sequence of her tap dancing up the stairs. It's just beautiful. Yeah, so that was my ranking. I mean, yours is pretty straightforward. Yours is alphabetical.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of caught on to that. I was telling the wife, I was like, Dyl guessed my ranking just because I said it was funny. It's like
the only way your order would have been funny was if it was alphabetical or if you put Wilson first.
I
That was
guess.
really the only ways it could have been funny to me. So I was like, I caught on. But
So-
I will not be Winston Churchilling on your list. I will not be sleeping on your list because it's a good list.
Thanks. So yeah, I don't know. Going My Way, Since You Went Away, and Wilson, all for me were. I don't know if I necessarily would have nominated any of these. If I had seen a lot more movies in the year, maybe I would have put like Arsenic and Old Lace on there, something else.
Damien St. Louis, yeah.
Yeah, maybe the Judy Garland movie for sure. Yeah, so maybe I would have like taken those off. I'm not sure, but I think that's a rough. The ones I was most sure about was Double Indemnity and Gaslight because I don't know. I guess I'm just a noir fan.
Yeah.
And they just kind of hit for me.
Yeah, and we've seen so much stem from those two films, just universally, thematically for Gaslight, stylistically and thematically for Double Indemnity. So now what we do is we look at these 5 movies only, so we're not going to take any other movies into account from that year. Sorry, Judy Garland. And we will determine our best actor and our best actress from that year. So I believe I start this time for best actor, correct?
Sure.
Because you started with last month.
It doesn't matter to me. Whatever you want to do.
Okay, my best actor, it is because you said Riz Ahmed first last week.
Okay.
Last month. So my best actor, we've talked about him plenty here because he is a record-breaking actor. I picked the one, the only Barry Fitzgerald for Going My Way. I did not love the movie, but his moments are very sweet.
Man, as a matter of curiosity, what made you become a priest?
His arc, I think he is a changed character from the beginning to the end, and the moments at the end where he's playing the golf and the thing goes in and he kind of just gets all happy, and then again at the end when he sees his mom, it's the moments that he doesn't even have to say anything and it's just pure joy emanating off his face. So that was my pick for best actor.
Dyl, I love that pick because I kind of thought of him for a second. He wasn't like a runner-up or anything, but I'm really glad you picked that one because he was really good in that movie.
Yeah. Who was your best actor, Chad?
My best actor, which I'm glad you didn't pick, was actually Fred McMurray from Double Indemnity.
Yeah, that was my backup for sure.
Yeah, watching through these movies, like just, I don't know, Double Indemnity just hit me in such a way, and I just think he was the best part of that movie. No shade thrown on Barbara Stanwyck, but like just he was that movie basically, just like from the very, very first,
He didn't get nominated either, which is crazy.
Yeah, which is insane. And just like, from the very first part where, he's just like, walking in, just like basically broken, like, this is the end. He's going to confess to, a friend, colleague.
Dear Keys, suppose you'll call this a confession when you hear it.
But then you have like all the little moments where he is that noir character where he says baby a lot, which it always like tickled me every time he said it.
It adds to his charisma. It makes him a cool guy. Yeah.
Every time he would say it, I'd repeat it. He'd just go baby, baby, baby. I want to watch it again just to say baby all the time.
So Chad, what is your Oscar scene for Fred McMurray?
I mean that's what I'm telling you. Like there's just like so many of them. I don't really have like one. I guess it's probably just him on the phone confessing, just distraught, broken, weakened, just sweating, like, he's just defeated.
When it came to picking the killer, you picked the wrong guy.
And who is your best actress? You will start us off for best actress this time.
My best actress is actually in line with the Academy. It was Ingrid Bergman from Gaslight.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, she basically, she was that movie. Like, I think the dude, what's his name? Whatever his name was.
Charles Boyer.
Yeah, he was like the top bill or whatever. But like, if you notice when I was reading the names, I swapped them because I'm like, no, she was the star of this.
It's her movie.
She was the star of this movie. Like, he was the force breaking her down, but she was the one that had to. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, this is another one where I don't know if I have like a single scene, but it's just maybe probably towards the end when she's really just like breaking down and she's just freaking out, just like, what's going on? Do I know like what is actually happening? Am I going insane? Are they gonna have to take me away?
And because I am mad, I'm rejoicing in my heart without a shred of pity, without a shred of regret, watching you go with glory in my heart.
It's just that whole movie for me with her, and that's why she won.
Solid body of work. Yeah, that's what I was talking about a little bit with Frances McDormand last month. Was it's hard to find one moment because it's just her overall body of work. My best actress, I went with the movie that I think had the best overall ensemble, and I picked out my favorite part of that ensemble, and that was Jennifer Jones in Since You Went Away. She is the oldest daughter who has that romance. It was hard again for me to pick a scene. I mean that train scene is obviously iconic. It inspired one of the best scenes in Airplane.
Oh, Bill, I'd take care of you the rest of our lives.
But I have to go with the scene where she gets the phone call that he is dead. That is such an impactful moment because you also get great acting from Claudette Colbert, basically having to deliver this news.
The telegram came just a few minutes ago. It was addressed to you, but I opened it.
Did it say he was missing or what?
She has this moment where she breaks down, the music swells with it.
It said he died in action at Salerno.
Oh, it couldn't be.
That honestly might be why it won Best Score. As indulgent as that overture is, those moments are great too. The sound cues where the music amps up and kicks in with that is my favorite scene of hers, and that's why she's my pick for Best Actress. So there you go. So the best picture, the best picture between the two of us is Double Indemnity, unanimously Double Indemnity. Chad's best actor is Fred McMurray. Mine is Barry Fitzgerald. Chad's best actress is Ingrid Bergman, and mine is Jennifer Jones. And that is 1944, people. A great year in terms of just movies that would inspire so many great movies to come. Maybe not the best movies of their genres, but for some of them, yes. But overall, it's clear to see that influence carry over throughout the future films that would come after it,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now we got to tease the next show. And this is something I've been wanting to do for a while. I did it on Letterboxd last year. I did a 2010 retrospective, and it was basically me going through all the movies of 2010 that I wanted to see or revisit and look at them 10 years later to see how it's changed over the course of a decade. And I'm going to be doing it again next month on my Letterboxd and some reviews on my channel, depending on the movies. Like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows is getting a video on my channel. But I decided I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do a retrospective of 2011, 10 years later, because we are now in the year 2021. It's been 10 years since all these movies came out. So I figured it would be a great opportunity to then rope this show in with the retrospective that I'm doing on Letterboxd and on my channel, and do 2011 as our next set of movies. And that is, I believe, 9 movies, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Those movies are The Artist, The Descendants, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, The Help, Hugo, Midnight in Paris, Moneyball, The Tree of Life, and War Horse. So those are the 9 movies we'll be talking about next month for 2011. They will be roped into the retrospective series, and Chad and I will be talking all about those Oscar films and our favorite performances from them. Any just pre 2011 thoughts as we transition?
No, I mean, this was a great pick, Dyl. I'm really excited to watch all these movies. Most I've seen, most I love. Some I haven't seen. So I'm very excited to revisit the ones I've seen and watch for the first time the ones I haven't.
And it's hard to say now what's on streaming if you're listening to this in May, because in June it could be a totally different scenario. So just keep your eyes out in June, early June, to see what those movies are available for streaming on, because they are newer, they are more accessible than, of course, these movies that we just talked about. Oh, sorry. But yeah, it was just really fun talking about classics, and it'll be fun to kind of go back in time only 10 years now and see. But again, the winner of that year was a silent film. So again, like it almost has some inspiration of classics too. So Chad, where can they find you on this beautiful internet verse?
Yeah, so I try to do stuff as well on Letterboxd, Chadwick_Webb. I try to do like a lot of like fan league trivia out there in the YouTube, Facebook worlds. We watch a lot of movie trivia schmodown, and so I'm trying my best. I'm okay at it, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, you can find me at Dylan_Randazzo at Twitter and or Letterboxd, preferably. And you can also find me here at the Dyl Pickle Movie Network on YouTube. I do this show. I do a show called Framewreck with Matt Chapman where we talk about So Bad They're Good movies. This month we talked about Face Off. It was a lot of fun. And of course we do Marvelous Movie Mondays every Monday here on the channel and on podcast form. And the Great American Film Off every first and third Friday of the month. We just did a show about mockumentaries, which was a lot of fun. And then next time we'll be doing Tom Hanks movies. So it's going to be a lot of fun on this channel. As I said, next month we got a lot of cool reviews coming for movies like whatever's coming out in June. I don't have a list on my laptop right now, but we're getting reviews soon for a bunch of summer movies coming in June, as well as the retrospective for 2011, both on Letterboxd and on my channel. And of course, Picture This next month, where we'll be talking about 2011. It's been a blast. Chad, any last words before we return from 1944 and return to the present?
Baby.